Welcome to Access Virtual Academy workshop working with assemblies. Today we will look at different ways to manage assembly files, large and small. Also, we're going to cover planes, toolpaths, level creations, view sheets, and some other functions inside of Mastercam's model prep that you might not be aware of. So let's get started. First thing I'm going to open is a small mold-based file. Go ahead and get that file open. It is a step file. And as you can see, it's a fairly simple mold base. Some components that I need to machine, all of these plates, the cavity core, rails, and whatnot. As you can see, everything came in on level 1. That makes it a little problematic to machine each of these components because they're all on the same level. So how do we manage that? We have several options in Mastercam. One of the easiest options is to select the component that I'm concerned about or I want to attack first and select Alt-E on the keyboard. Alt-E on the keyboard is a shortcut for the hide function. So now I have the core basically by itself, and I can go ahead and machine that. Not a problem. You can see that my model is out in space. It's not relative to my top plane in Mastercam. So one of the things that people have a tendency to do is, okay, I'm just going to take this geometry and I'm going to move it to my origin. I'm going to go transform, move to origin, select the point that I want to be at the origin, and it moves. And now I have a good pickup. The zero corner, I can pick that up when it's on my machine, and I can go to work. The issue with doing that is if I hit Alt-E again, you can see the rest of my geometry is still in the original position. I like to keep the associativity between components. So this isn't a situation I want to work with. So I'm just going to go ahead. So we'll put that back. So one of the other options would be move the whole thing to the origin. So if I say move to origin with everything on now and select my zero corner up here, everything will move to the origin. Again, very viable option, but there's some reasons why I wouldn't want to do that. One of the reasons is if I go back to my core and say Alt-E, you can see that my core still isn't in a position where my origin is in a place that I can pick up. So I'm going to have to manipulate this even further. One of the other downfalls of this is if this mold gets changed either by my customer or by my CAD department, and they send me a Rev 2 of this, and I import this into my part file, it's going to be in the original position. It's not going to be here, so I have to go through this process again. I don't want to have to do that. So we're going to go through and select some different options that may be a little bit more efficient for us to do. So again, we're going to look at the core, and I don't want to move the core for right now. I want to keep it where it's at. So I'm going to isolate the core, and by isolating the core, what I'm going to do is put it on its own level. So I'm going to right click. I'm going to go to my change level icon, and I'm going to create level 2, and I'm going to call it core. And you can see on my levels manager, I now have 2 levels, and level 2 has just one component. And if I shut level 1 off, there's my core. Before going any further, I want to show you a function in Mastercam that we think is underutilized, and it's called view sheets. I'm going to turn my view sheets on. If your view sheets aren't on when you open up your Mastercam, you simply go to the View tab and turn the on off switch so it's highlighted, and you'll see a view sheet pop up down here. This is a main view sheet. I'm going to go ahead and rename that. So I right click on that, rename view sheet, and I'm going to call this mold base. I'm going to turn all my components back on, and then I'm going to right click on that again, and I'm going to say save view sheet bookmark. Bookmark, just like if you're reading a book, is a placeholder. I'll show you what that function does as we move forward here. So I'm going to turn everything back off. So now here's my core. And if we examine the core, you can see I've got three setups. I've got the top or the parting line. I have to do some machining there. I've got this hole that I need to machine in, and I've got some backside work. I still don't have a plane that I can use. So I'm going to create a plane. So I'm going to turn my planes on. There's the planes that are in Mastercam. I could come over here and select the little arrow next to the plus sign, and these are the different ways I can create a plane. For my purposes, I'm going to use the dynamic plane creator, which is down here in my graphics area. And all I have to do is select that plane, drag it where I want. You'll notice if I put it on this face, the Z changes because of that geometry. But if I go to this corner and I anchor it, it happens to be positioned the way that I want it, but I could rotate it, I can slide it, manipulate it the way that I want. But I like that. I'm going to put it on that corner, and I'm going to call this plane core. I'm going to make sure that it's my WCS tool and construction plane. And I'm going to go into the Advanced tab. And in the Advanced tab, there's a couple boxes that I want to make sure that are checked. One is Create View Sheet, and one is Save Bookmark. With those checked, I'm going to go ahead and hit the green check mark. And you can see it's done a couple things. One, it's created my core plane. It's made it my WCS construction and tool plane. But it's also created a view sheet. A view sheet isn't just something that manipulates the view. It just doesn't give me another view of my part or my component. What this does is if I move this around and I want to look into this area, I want to go back to my mold base. You see, it remembers the view of my mold base. If you've noticed over on my planes, it also remembers that the WCS construction and tool plane of my mold base was the Mastercam's top. But if I go back to core, you can see those planes automatically switch. This is a handy function. This is nice to have because it gives me the ability to toggle between my view sheets and automatically update this. Saves me the time. I don't have to go into my planes and manipulate that. Having said that, I have my parting line that I can machine now because I have my plane created, but I still haven't created planes for the front or the bottom. One of the functions that we can use in Mastercam is I can right click on the core that I just created. And you can see on my list here, I can create planes relative to. And if I select that, you can see I have a list here, and it will create all the boxes that are checked. It will create planes relative to this WCS. So if I wanted to create planes in this way for the front and for the bottom, I simply check those boxes, hit the green check mark, and in my planes list, it will now have a core front and a core bottom. That's a very quick way to create planes relative to, especially when I know I need them. So we're going to go ahead and continue. I'm going to do just a quick tool path on the top here. So I'm going to go and grab my machine. I'm going to select the default mill, and I'm going to do an OptiRough. Go ahead and select all my geometry. I'm going to select the boundary chain, and for our purposes, I'm just going to select this one cavity. Say okay to that. I'm going to go grab a 1/4 inch bullnose. Going to leave my step over at 10%. We're going to step down 150%, and we're going to step up 10%. Go ahead and set my linking parameters, my arc filter tolerances. Make sure my planes, which they should be core, core, core. I did go through these settings relatively quickly. We will take more time in some other workshops to discuss these in detail. Go ahead and let that calculate for a minute. So there's my toolpath. I didn't set all of the settings, so it's not as accurate as I would like, but we get the idea. So let's say that the top is done and I need to attack the front now. Again, I don't have a plane. I didn't create the planes relative, so I'm just going to use dynamic again. And I'm going to go ahead and click on that. I'm going to move it over to my origin. And this time I do need to rotate it. So I'm going to rotate my axis down 90 degrees. So my tool axis, or my WCS, is now pointing at the plane that I needed. We're going to call this front core. And again, in my advanced tab, because I checked these boxes before, it's going to remember that those are checked. And I can go ahead and hit the green check mark. Now notice it created the front core and a view sheet. I'm sorry, a view sheet and the bookmark. If I go to an isometric view now, there's the isometric view of this plane. But my bookmark was already created. I want this to be the bookmark. I want this to save. So I'm going to right click and I'm going to say save view sheet bookmark. So now when I toggle between the three, you can see not only do my views change, but my planes change as well. So let's talk about this hole. This is a 1/2 inch tapped hole. It's a handling hole. I'm sure all of you guys have had to program tapped holes, both 1/2 inch, 1/4 inch, 3/8, a myriad of sizes. I want to talk about operation libraries for just a minute. It's another way to make you a little bit more efficient when it comes to programming. I'm sure there's people who, when they program this 1/2 inch tapped hole, will go in and say tool paths, drill, select the point, go in and then select the spot drill, set the speeds and feeds, go back, select drill again, select the drill that's necessary to drill that tapped hole, set the speeds and feeds, and then go find the tap for every hole that you do. You think about that, you do the same process for every 1/2 inch tapped hole. We have the ability in Mastercam to save that operation library and then import it for later use. So I'm going to go import. In my operation for my mills, I have a folder called tapped holes. If I go in there, you can see I got a 1/2 inch UNC. I'm going to select that. I'm going to go and select those operations, and I'm going to say, put those in my part file. It tells me that it did it successfully. I'm going to say OK and then close this. But you see, I now have 3 operations. I can go in, select my geometry. So I'm going to go ahead and select that point, say OK. Drag this geometry down. So we're going to replace, say OK. Sorry. Replace, say OK. Recalculate dirty toolpaths, and there we go. We just did my 1/2 inch tapped hole. Much faster. Knows the tools that I used. It saves the tool and the tool number. It not only saves the tool and the tool number, but it saves the speeds and feeds as well. Every time you create a new operation for a different size hole, you can go ahead, select those, and export them. It's the same process we just did as importing, only in reverse. So I want to send that to that folder, make sure everything I want is selected, hit the plus, and it will write that to my operation library so I can go grab that next time. Again, we will discuss those in greater detail in some upcoming workshops. All right. So now I have the front done, the top done, and I would do the same thing for the back. But I want to move on. I need to do the cavity. So I'm going to go ahead and look at my mold base. Notice I just select the view sheet. I don't have to turn anything on. I don't have to go to my planes. I don't have to go to my levels to turn everything on and off. It does that for me automatically. And I'm going to select the cavity. So I'm going to select that cavity. I'm going to right click on it. And I'm going to go into my levels function and select level 3. We'll call this cavity. I now have level 3 cavity only. Notice I haven't changed the associativity between my components. They're all still where they need to be. My cavity, I have the same situation. I got to do some backside work, top work. Doesn't look like there's any side work I need to do. So let's just take a look, and here's my 0 corner. And I want to go ahead and create a plane so I can pick this up. I'm going to use my dynamic plane creator again. We'll bring it to my 0 corner. Obviously, I need to orientate and rotate my my Z 180 degrees. My X is fine. This is an 8x8 mold base, so I'm going to leave that there. But I could, if I wanted to, say I wanted to use the parting line instead of the back of my plate. I could go ahead and drag this up here if I wanted to, manipulate this in such a way that I could put that any place that I want, but I'm going to leave it right there. I'm going to call this cavity. It's set as my WCS tool and construction plane. I'm going to go into my advanced tab, and again, these are checked. Green check mark, and there's my view sheet. If I right click and go to an isometric view, there we go. I can save view sheet bookmark. So as you can see, I'm building up quite a list of view sheets. And if I have to go back, if I forgot to do something on the core, I can do that. In my levels, there's my cavity. So now I can do the tool paths on the cavity as needed. And what I have the ability to do now is to separate all of my components, put them on different levels, and I can manage this mold base this way. This is a relatively small mold base, and managing that way is fairly efficient. One of the other things that I can do inside of Mastercam is on the model prep tab. So on any size part, any size assembly, we can use this function, but on small parts or assemblies such as this, it works very, very well, and it's called disassemble. So I can select the disassemble, and the disassemble operation manager comes up, and the first thing that I want to make sure is that I'm not moving my components, that I'm copying them. And then it says select bodies to disassemble. So I've essentially got 8 bodies that I need to work with: this plate, the cavity, the core, the 2 rails, the ejection, and the bottom clamp plate. So I'm going to select these individually. I don't want to select these components and the pins because those are standard components and I don't need to disassemble them or to manage them. So I'm going to go ahead and select these, and you'll notice as I select them, it's creating copies of them. Once I get them all selected, those copies get moved relative to the world origin in Mastercam and get lined up along my X plus axis with a spacing of 1 inch. I'm going to go ahead and increase that ever so slightly. And it says move to levels. So I'm going to go ahead and I've got those 8 components selected. I'm going to go ahead and hit the green check mark. What this has done is it's now created levels 1000 through 1007 of my new components. It didn't create any view sheets, but I can create view sheets manually if I desire to. But I can turn all my components off now, and now I can select cut extrude number 8, and I can go ahead and machine that. It happens to be at my Mastercam world top, so I could just leave that there. But again, I could create planes. I could do everything that we just showed you with this that we did manually, except now I can do this automatically. One of the really nice things about this function is if at any point this model gets changed, engineering change, Rev 2, they change the size of some screws or some holes and they send you a new model, I can simply go in and select all of these. I didn't want to right click that, sorry. And I can delete them. I haven't moved this geometry. I've got toolpath associated with everything I just deleted. Obviously that toolpath is going to go dirty, which is okay, because I can go ahead and use this function again. I can grab the new plates. It's going to put them exactly where it did previously. So my geometry, my containment boundaries, everything that I did in the toolpaths that I have associated with the old geometry is going to be usable in this geometry, and I simply need to regenerate my toolpaths. I don't have to manipulate. All the planes will still be there. It makes this function very, very useful. And one of the things that it doesn't do is it doesn't create my view sheets for me automatically, but we can go in and create those manually. And we've discussed small assemblies. Let's take a look here just before we wrap things up. Let's take a look at a larger assembly. Go ahead and open a larger assembly. And even this assembly isn't that large. It's got a lot of components associated with it. You can see it takes a little bit longer to open. Now let's just say you decided you want to make a CNC machine for your garage. You don't get enough machining at the shop, so you want to do it at home. So you got the plans to make this. This is a file. All of these separate components, if we take a look at them, are all on separate levels. That would be great if I knew what all of these were, but I just opened this CAD model. I don't. We've got 70 levels or so. And if we take a look at this, managing this size geometry can be problematic. It takes Mastercam sometimes, especially for very large assembly files, to manipulate, to move. So what I want to do is take the components that I know I need to manufacture, like this spindle, I'm not going to have to. This is all going to be a component that I would buy, but let's just say those. I've got those features that I need to actually manufacture. What I can do is use something in Mastercam called Save Sum. I can go into my Backstage menu here, and I'm going to say Save Sum. I've got that selected. I'm going to call it Detail 1. Say Save. And now if I go back into my directory, you can see I've got Assembly for Class Large Detail 1. If I open that, there is that component by itself. Much easier to manage, much easier to deal with. Mastercam is going to run much faster. If I take a look at this, I could go ahead and go set my planes as I need to, bring in my machine, set my stock setup as necessary, and I'm good to go. This does increase the memory on your computer. So if I have my assembly, I am creating additional part files, but sometimes that's going to be necessary, especially with large assemblies. So I'm going to go ahead and open up that large assembly once again. And after this opens, go to a top view. I'm going to look at disassemble once again. I'm going to say disassemble. And this time I'm going to select everything. I selected everything. Yes, I did copy it. I moved it to the levels. If I didn't care about this assembly and I wanted to move everything, I could select that and it actually moves instead of copying. See, it's still working. I can say okay. And it will take several seconds when it's done calculating, it's taken all of my components and moved them. The nice thing about this is it now lists them in such a way where I can look at these components, and if these aren't standard components, I can see the number I need to make. I need 3 of these, 2 of these, 2 of these, 1 of these, 3 of these components. So I could take that component, save some, call it detail 3, 1 of 3, and manufacture it as I need to. Just another function that is inside Mastercam that you guys may not have known was there. And with that, I'm going to wrap things up. I appreciate your time and enjoy the rest of your day.